It happens. The Green Bay Packers get a wide receiver. They trade up for Christian Watson, and this wasn't necessarily the wide receiver we were expecting. I mean, a lot of people thought that you were actually going to get the Kansas City Chiefs taking Christian Watson at the end of the first round. That was a very common landing spot, and Watson is, honestly, one of the perfect players to land in Green Bay. Obviously, this is a team that has a massive hole up wide receiver, and Watson has an intriguing prospect profile in that while if you throw him into our model, he doesn't necessarily pop. He is the perfect example of a player that you have to dive a little bit deeper in on. You really have to understand why Christian Watson doesn't look appealing on paper, but in reality, if you adjust some different measures, he looks like he has an elite ceiling. And the one thing that I really want to discuss before anything else is the dominance that he had in school. Obviously, he didn't play at Alabama. He wasn't going up against Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson at Ohio State, but still impressive to say the least that this is a wide receiver that goes out there and accounts for 44% of his team's passing yards on a per game basis his senior season. Now, what I also like about Christian Watson is the fact that this is probably the best size-adjusted athlete at the wide receiver position in this draft class. I mean, he was pretty much what a lot of people wanted to see from a player like Treylon Burks. Remember, going into the NFL Combine, everybody thought Treylon Burks was going to be that size-adjusted freak. It ended up being Christian Watson, and here with Christian Watson now he will be able to be a little bit of both Marquez Valdes-Scantling because he does have the speed on the outside, but he also has the ability to command targets like Devontae Adams and specifically be a red zone threat with the size that he provides for this offense. I'm not expecting that Robert Tonyan goes back to 2020 where Robert Tonyan's scoring a touchdown on every 6 targets. It looks like we have Breece Hall to the Jets. We'll cover that in the next video. This is going to be a very exciting round 2. But with Christian Watson, what I want to go revisit with our model is why he does not necessarily pop, and that's he declared late for the NFL draft. And if you look historically, wide receivers that stay all 4 years in college, they don't necessarily have a great hit rate at the next level. But there's a massive but on this. We have to make our adjustments because fantasy football isn't as easy as creating a model on Google Sheets, creating a model in Microsoft Excel, and then all of a sudden thinking you know exactly which order you should be drafting these players. Because with Christian Watson, you need the context that his junior season, remember, it was 2020. That was when the COVID year was happening for college football. And with these smaller schools, that is where you need to be making the adjustment because it was a shortened season. But more importantly, he had to play football in the spring. They pushed their season back to the spring for Christian Watson. So he was unable to declare for the NFL draft. I mean, unless you're Trey Lance. Now, that's another thing I want to get to. The fact that he was sharing a locker room with Trey Lance, he was rubbing elbows with Trey Lance for 2 years in school. I mean, that just has to make you a better player overall. I mean, you know my stance on Trey Lance. I think everything Trey Lance touches will eventually turn to gold, including Christian Watson. But all jokes aside, if you look at his profile as a breakout sophomore, and we just put a massive asterisk on his declared date and say if he declared as a true junior based on what he could have potentially done if it wasn't for COVID, he looks like one of the better wide receivers in this draft class. Now that he finds this fantastic landing spot, we have to have a realistic conversation on where he should be going in rookie drafts. Because if I'm pulling this up, obviously you're not taking him over the elite guys. You're not taking him over Drake London. You're not taking him over Garrett Wilson. You're not taking him over Treylon Burks. But after then, it's crazy to say this because obviously he falls to round 2. I think you have an argument to possibly have Christian Watson in that same tier with guys like Chris Olave and Jameson Williams. And the reason for this is we're playing fantasy football. We're trying to score points. Now, I am going to try my best to not all of a sudden make a massive overreaction based on the landing spot for the Green Bay Packers. But we know Rodgers is here. We know he is safe to stay over the next, 2 to 3 seasons in Green Bay. There's no worry that a quarterback change is going to happen. And it's not like you have Christian Watson stepping into this situation where he's going to be the wide receiver 1A to someone's wide receiver 1B. It's not Garrett Wilson with the New York Jets where you have Elijah Moore on the roster. You have nobody. You got Sammy Watkins there. So I think you can be very excited about the landing spot. My initial reaction is I'm not moving Christian Watson over Chris Olave. I'm not moving him over Jameson Williams, but he probably moves ahead of Jahan Dotson for me because those were two wide receivers that if you look at our wide receiver prospect model, they were graded out pretty much identical with the asterisks that Christian Watson could have declared after his junior season if it wasn't for COVID. So if they already graded out as identical, should we be overreacting to the fact that Washington took Jahan Dotson in the middle of round 1, whereas Christian Watson fell to the beginning of round 2? I personally don't think so. If it was the running back position, that draft capital would mean a little bit more, indicating opportunity going forward. But at the wide receiver position, I mean, both players should be able to get on the field. I think both players are similar talents overall. So I'm probably going to be leaning with the guy that isn't competing for targets with Terry McLaurin. And instead of having Carson Wentz as his quarterback, he has Aaron Rodgers. Let me know what you are thinking, please, in the chat right now. I know we got a lot of people talking about Breece Hall to the Jets. We'll get that going in 1 second. But please let me know what you are thinking about Christian Watson in terms of how are you ranking Christian Watson compared to Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, and Jahan Dotson. I want to say that he is between the tier of Olave, Jameson Williams, and Jahan Dotson. I think you have to have the two former Ohio State wide receivers in Olave and Jameson Williams ahead of Christian Watson, despite the landing spot. But you potentially, I mean, I think you are forced to move Christian Watson over Dotson, but I honestly really want to entertain. Like, Jameson Williams went to the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff is his quarterback on the Detroit Lions, and he's competing for targets with TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, as well as Amon-Ra St. Brown. Whereas Christian Watson has Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. It is competing for targets with legitimately nobody. He's competing for targets with Sammy Watkins. And you know, I love me some Sammy Watkins. Speaking of our wide receiver prospect model, Sammy Watkins is right up there with one of the highest graded wide receiver scores ever. Like, I started playing Dynasty in 2014, fell in love with the game then, and Sammy Watkins was the top wide receiver in that class. Trust me, we used to have a Sammy Watkins Buffalo Bills jersey hanging up behind us. I love me some Sammy Watkins, but he's nothing. Christian Watson steps in to be the wide receiver 1 on this team right away. And it looks like nobody wants to talk about Christian Watson. Looks like everybody wants to talk about Breece Hall. So we'll end this live stream. We'll run over, start a new one for Breece Hall. But please go down there, drop a like on the stream, subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, and I'll see you in about 5 seconds.